The great hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of species sat in their designated sections, their bodies ranging from massive stone-like creatures to beings made of pure light. At the center of this grand chamber, Ambassador Volith stood at the speaking platform. His forearms moved gracefully as he addressed the gathered representatives. "My fellow members of the Assembly," Volith said, his voice carrying through translation devices to every corner of the hall, "I understand there are concerns about the Veldari Dominion's recent activities. But, let us not panic. The Veldari have assured us their expansion is purely economic." A low murmur passed through the crowd. Many species had already lost worlds to the Veldari. Their economic expansion left only ashes and slaves behind. Besides, Volith continued with a small laugh, the sectors they are interested in are mostly empty. The only significant presence there is the humans. He paused for effect. And, we all know about the humans. Harmless creatures who barely survived their own adolescence. They nearly destroyed themselves before they even reached the stars. Hardly a species worth starting a galactic conflict over. Laughter rippled through parts of the assembly. Yes, everyone knew about the humans. A young species. Emotional. Primitive by galactic standards. They had joined the assembly 300 years ago, and, in that time, they had done nothing remarkable. They traded fairly, kept to themselves, and maintained only a small defensive fleet. They were, by all accounts, utterly unremarkable. In a dark corner of the assembly hall, an ancient being named Thales watched the proceedings with growing unease. Thales was a scholar, one of the oldest living members of any species. His body was withered, kept alive by machines older than most civilizations. But, his mind remained sharp, and his memory stretched back further than anyone knew. He remembered things. Things the galaxy had chosen to forget. Thales looked at the human delegation sitting quietly in their small section. They wore simple clothes. They smiled politely. They looked exactly like what everyone believed them to be, harmless, peaceful, insignificant. But, Thales remembered the sealed archives. He remembered the first contact wars from 5,000 years ago. He remembered what humans had done to 3 species that had threatened them. Those species no longer existed. Not conquered. Not enslaved. Simply erased from existence as if they had never been. The galaxy had begged the humans to stop. And they had. They had buried their weapons, hidden their true fleet, and chosen peace. Over thousands of years, the memory faded. New species rose and fell. The records were sealed, then forgotten. Only beings like Thales still knew the truth. And, now a fool named Volith was laughing about humans being harmless. Far across the galaxy, on a blue-green world called Earth, Admiral Dohan Kong sat in his office reviewing routine reports. He was a tall man in his 60s, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen much but revealed little. His uniform was simple, without excessive decorations. He did not believe in showing off. The reports were boring, which was exactly how Dohan liked them. Trade shipments arriving on schedule. Colony populations growing steadily. A minor dispute about fishing rights on one of the ocean worlds. Normal problems. Peaceful problems. His assistant knocked and entered. "Admiral, the assembly session has concluded." Ambassador Volith made another speech about the Veldari situation. "And?" Dohan asked without looking up. "He called us harmless, sir. Said we barely survived our own adolescence." Dohan allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Let them think that." "Sir?" "Nothing. Is there anything else?" "No, Admiral. All quiet on all fronts." "Good. Dismissed." After his assistant left, Dohan stood and walked to his window. Earth spread out below him, beautiful and green. Children were playing in parks. Families were having dinner. Young people were falling in love. Old people were watching sunsets. Peace. This was what mattered. This was what they had chosen. He thought about his grandchildren. About the world they would inherit. He had spent his entire career making sure that world would be safe and quiet. On the outer edges of human space, Captain Hanayun stood on the bridge of her ship, the Eternal Wrath. It was an older vessel, considered outdated by galactic standards. The assembly representatives who occasionally visited always looked at it with barely hidden amusement. Such primitive technology, they thought. Such a small ship. Hannah let them think whatever they wanted. She knew what her ship really was. She knew about the systems that lay dormant beneath the standard hull. She knew about the weapons that slept in hidden compartments. Every human captain knew. It was part of their training, passed down in whispers and sealed files. "Captain," her navigator said, "patrol complete. All clear. Good. Set course for the next sector. Nice and slow." "Yes, Captain." Hannah looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Veldari Dominion was growing stronger. She had read the intelligence reports. She knew what they did to conquered species. The slavery. The massacres. The burned worlds. She hoped they would never come to human space. She truly did. Not because she feared them, but because she knew what would happen if they did. In the heart of the Veldari Dominion, High Overseer Krimoth reviewed the plans for the next phase of expansion. He was a massive creature, standing 9 feet tall, with armored skin and, for eyes that glowed with cold intelligence. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had crushed every enemy who dared to stand against them. "The human sectors," he said, pointing at a holographic map. "Rich in resources. Minimal defenses. Their fleet is laughable." His advisors nodded eagerly. "The humans are weak, High Overseer. They have no warriors. Their culture celebrates peace and cooperation. They will surrender quickly. And, if they don't? Then, we will burn their worlds until they do. As we have done with all others." Krimoth smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Begin preparations. I want the invasion fleet ready within 1 cycle. It will be done, High Overseer." After his advisors left, Krimoth looked at the small blue dot on his map that represented Earth. Such a small world. Such a small species. They would serve the Dominion well, either as slaves or as an example to others. Humanity will serve or burn, he said to himself. Either way, they will kneel. He had conquered 100 species. He had never lost a war. He had no reason to believe this would be any different. He did not know about the sealed archives. He did not know about the first contact wars. He did not know that somewhere in the depths of human space, ancient machines waited in silence, dreaming of fire. He did not know that he had just made the worst mistake in the history of his species. The stars continued to shine, cold and distant. The galaxy continued to spin, peaceful and unaware. And humanity continued to smile, patient and quiet. But, deep beneath 1,000 worlds, something old began to stir. The sky above New Busan burned orange and red. Veldari warships hung in the atmosphere like dark clouds, their weapons firing endless streams of destruction onto the city below. Buildings that had stood for 100 years collapsed in seconds. Streets where children had played that morning were now rivers of ash and rubble. Lieutenant Niho Park watched from the cockpit of his damaged fighter. His squadron was gone. 12 pilots, 12 friends, all destroyed in the first minutes of the attack. His own ship was barely flying, one engine dead, the other failing. Warning lights covered every screen. Below him, he could see people running. Families trying to escape. Emergency vehicles rushing toward fires they could never put out. And, through it all, the Veldari ships continued their work, methodical and merciless. "This is Lieutenant Park to anyone receiving," Niho said into his communication system. His voice was steady, even though his hands were shaking. "New Busan is under attack. Repeat, New Busan is under attack. Enemy forces overwhelming. Request immediate assistance." Only static answered him. He turned his damaged ship toward open space. He had to get this message home. Someone had to know what was happening here. Someone had to warn Earth. As he flew away from his burning world, he looked back one last time. He saw a Veldari ship broadcast something to the surface. Moments later, explosions bloomed across the city center. They were executing survivors. They were making an example. Miho flew into the darkness of space, carrying the weight of everything he had just witnessed. Over the next 72 hours, 7 human colonies fell. The Veldari attacked without warning, without demands, without mercy. They did not ask for surrender. They simply destroyed. On each world, the pattern was the same. Ships would appear without warning. Defenses would crumble within hours. And, then, the broadcasts would begin. The Veldari recorded everything. They showed executions. They showed cities burning. They transmitted these images across all frequencies, making sure every human world could see what was coming. This is the price of weakness, Commander Relkes announced in each broadcast. Surrender now, and some of you may live to serve the Dominion. Resist, and you will join these ashes. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. Representatives from 100 species filled the Great Hall, their voices rising in worried chatter. This was unprecedented. The Veldari had attacked a member species without any formal declaration. Ambassador Valeth took the speaking platform, his forearms raised for silence. My fellow members, he began, we have all seen the terrible events unfolding in human space. The Veldari actions are regrettable. However, we must consider our response carefully. A delegate from a smaller species stood up. Carefully? They are slaughtering civilians. We must intervene. Valeth shook his head sadly. The Veldari fleet numbers in the tens of thousands. Their military power exceeds that of the Assembly's combined forces. To intervene would mean war on a scale we cannot survive. So we do nothing? We express our concern. We impose economic sanctions. We condemn their actions in the strongest possible terms. Valeth paused. But, we cannot risk the safety of the entire galaxy for one small species. The humans are unfortunate casualties of galactic politics. But, they are not worth the destruction of everything we have built. The Assembly voted. By a margin of 3-1, they chose not to intervene. In his dark corner, Scholar Thales watched the proceedings with horror. They were abandoning humanity. They were leaving them to die. And, they had no idea what they were about to unleash. On Earth, the news arrived like a wave of ice water. Every screen, every device, every speaker suddenly went silent. Then, a tone sounded, one that had not been heard in 300 years. The emergency broadcast. Admiral Dohun Kang's face appeared on every screen. Citizens of Earth, he said, his voice calm and measured, I must inform you of a grave situation. The Veldari Dominion has attacked our colonies. 7 worlds have fallen. Millions of our people are dead or enslaved. He paused, letting the words sink in. The Galactic Assembly has refused to help us. We stand alone. Across the planet, people stopped what they were doing. Families gathered around screens. Workers put down their tools. Children looked to their parents for explanation. 300 years ago, Dohun continued, we made a promise. We chose peace. We buried our weapons and joined a galaxy that we hoped would become our friends. For 300 years, we kept that promise. We were kind. We were gentle. We were everything we hoped to be. His eyes hardened slightly. But, they have killed our children. They have burned our homes. They think we are prey. He paused again. Shall we remind the universe what we are? The United Earth Council convened within the hour. Every leader from every nation attended, either in person or through holographic connection. Admiral Dohun Kang stood before them, waiting. You all know the situation, he said. You all know what they have done. I am asking for your vote on Article 0. Article 0. The Total War Protocol. A law written 300 years ago and never used. A law that gave the military unlimited resources, unlimited authority, and unlimited permission to do whatever was necessary to protect humanity. The vote was unanimous. Every hand raised. Every voice said yes. Do-Han nodded once. Then, it begins. Deep beneath the city, in a facility that did not appear on any map, Dr. Yuna Shin received a call she had waited her entire career to receive. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray-streaked hair. She had spent 30 years working on projects that officially did not exist. Dr. Do-Han's voice said through her secure line, "It's time. Activate Project Awakening." Yuna took a deep breath. Understood, Admiral. Full activation? Everything. Wake up everything. Yuna ended the call and turned to her team. They were already moving, already preparing. They had trained for this moment, hoping it would never come. Begin the sequence, she ordered. Send the activation codes to all sites. Across human space, on moons and asteroids and hidden stations, ancient systems began to power up. Machines that had slept for centuries opened their eyes. Factories that had stood dormant began to hum. Weapons that the galaxy had forgotten began to remember. On a military base that officially housed only training facilities, General Tehobek walked into a hangar that should not have existed. He was a large man, quiet and thoughtful, with scars that told stories he never shared. They called him the Silent Storm, though few knew why. Before him stood row after row of war machines. Not the small, outdated ships the galaxy knew about. Real ships. Warships. Thousands of them, waiting in perfect formation. "Wake them up," Teho said softly. "Wake them all up." Engineers began their work. Lights flickered on across the massive hangar. Engines that had not fired in generations began to warm. And, deep in the cores of these sleeping giants, combat systems began to run their startup sequences. Teho looked at the machines that would soon carry humanity's fury to the stars. "I'm sorry," he whispered to no one in particular. "I'm sorry it came to this." But his eyes were not soft. They were not gentle. They were the eyes of a man who had seen war before and knew exactly what was coming. Somewhere in the darkness of space, the Veldari Dominion celebrated their easy victories. They had no idea that across human space, something terrible was waking up. They would learn soon enough. Scholar Talis walked through the forbidden archives alone. His old legs ached with each step, but he did not stop. The corridor stretched deep underground, past security systems that had not been activated in millennia, past doors sealed with warnings in languages no longer spoken. At the end of the corridor, he found what he was looking for. A single room. A single terminal. And files that contained the truth about humanity. With trembling hands, he activated the terminal. The screen flickered to life, showing images and records from 5,000 years ago. The First Contact Wars. Talis watched as the records played. He saw 3 species, all aggressive, all powerful by the standards of their time. They had found Earth. They had decided to conquer it. They had attacked without mercy, killing millions of humans in the opening strikes. And, then, humanity had responded. The records showed weapons that could make stars explode. Ships that moved faster than light itself. Soldiers who fought without fear of death. In a single generation, humanity had reduced 3 species to nothing. Not conquered. Not defeated. Erased. Their worlds were ash. Their fleets were dust. Their very names were forgotten. The galaxy had begged humanity to stop. They had promised peace, promised cooperation, promised anything if the humans would just stop. And humanity had agreed. They had buried their weapons. They had hidden their true fleet. They had pretended to be weak, pretended to be primitive, pretended to be harmless. For 5,000 years, they had kept their promise. Thales closed the files. His hands would not stop shaking. He had to warn the galaxy. He had to let everyone know what the Veldari had just awakened. Captain Hannah Yoon stood on the bridge of the Eternal Wrath and watched her ship transform. All around her, hidden panels were sliding open. Weapon systems that had never appeared on any official blueprint were coming online. Armor plating unfolded from secret compartments, tripling the ship's defensive capability. "Captain," her weapons officer said, voice tight with emotion, "all systems online. We are at full combat readiness." Hannah looked at her screens. The Eternal Wrath was no longer the small, outdated patrol ship the galaxy knew. It was now a dreadnought-class extinction vessel, bristling with weapons that could crack a moon in half. Her orders had arrived that morning. They were simple. No retreat. No surrender. No mercy. Set course for the front lines, she commanded. All crew to battle stations. "Yes, Captain." As the ship began to move, Hannah allowed herself one moment of sadness. She had hoped to live her whole life without ever using these weapons. She had hoped her children would never know what their mother's ship could really do. But hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. Across human space, the transformation was happening everywhere. Ships that had looked weak revealed their true forms. Orbital stations deployed weapons platforms that had been hidden for centuries. On planetary surfaces, factories that had made consumer goods began producing war materials with terrifying efficiency. What shocked the watching galaxy was the speed. Within days of the declaration of total war, humanity had a fully mobilized military force larger than anything they had believed possible. Ships appeared from hidden shipyards. Soldiers emerged from training facilities that had never been on any map. Weapons systems that the galaxy had never seen before became operational. It was as if humanity had been preparing for this moment for thousands of years. Because they had been. Ambassador Volith received a transmission from Earth. He expected a plea for help, perhaps a desperate request for the Assembly to reconsider their position. Instead, he received a warning. Admiral Do-hun Kang's face appeared on his screen. The human's expression was calm, almost peaceful. But his eyes were cold. "Ambassador," Do-hun said, "I am contacting you as a courtesy. Humanity is now in a state of total war with the Veldari Dominion. We do not require the Assembly's assistance. We do not want the Assembly's assistance." Volith struggled to find words. "Admiral, please, let us discuss this. Perhaps there is a diplomatic solution." There was a diplomatic solution. "You chose not to pursue it. You left us to die." Do-hun's voice did not change. It remained calm, measured, almost gentle. "Now we will handle this ourselves. I am contacting you only to deliver this message: stay out of our way." The transmission ended. Volith sat in silence for a long moment. Then, he began making calls to other Assembly members. Something was very wrong. The humans he had known for 300 years were peaceful traders and friendly neighbors. This cold, quiet admiral was something else entirely. Commander Relkes led the Veldari advance force toward the next human colony. His fleet had crushed 7 worlds already. He expected this one to fall just as easily. The first sign of trouble came when his sensors detected incoming ships. That was normal. Every colony had tried to defend itself. What was not normal was the number. His sensors showed hundreds of human vessels approaching, then thousands. And their energy signatures were unlike anything in his database. "What is this?" Relkes demanded. "Our intelligence said they had only a small defensive fleet." His officers had no answer. The human ships arrived like a wave of fire. They attacked from every direction at once, their movements coordinated with impossible precision. Relkes watched in shock as his advance guard, 50 ships strong, was destroyed in minutes. "Fall back," he ordered. "All ships fall back." But the humans did not let them retreat. They pursued with relentless determination, picking off fleeing ships one by one. Their tactics were aggressive beyond anything Relkis had ever seen. They seemed to have no fear of death, no instinct for self-preservation. They fought like creatures who had already accepted that they might not survive, and simply did not care. By the time Relkis reached the safety of the main fleet, he had lost 200 ships. "Send a message to High Overseer Krymith," he said, his voice hollow. Tell him we have made an error." On the occupied colony of New Busan, Veldari soldiers controlled what remained of the city. They had established camps for the human survivors. They had begun the process of breaking the population's spirit. Then, the humans came back. One soldier. Just one. He had somehow survived in the ruins, hiding and waiting. When the Veldari found him, he was wounded, bleeding from a dozen cuts. He should have been begging for mercy. Instead, he was laughing. Before they could understand what was happening, the soldier triggered explosives he had placed throughout their command center. The entire building collapsed, taking 40 Veldari warriors with it. High Overseer Krymith watched the footage in silence. His advisors stood around him, none daring to speak. "One soldier," Krymith said finally. "One wounded, dying soldier. And he took 40 of our warriors with him. He did not try to escape. He did not try to survive. He simply made sure he killed as many of us as possible before the end." He turned to his advisors. "What have we awakened?" No one had an answer. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly, Scholar Talis took the speaking platform. His ancient voice trembled, but his words were clear. "I must show you something," he said. "Something the galaxy chose to forget. Something that explains what is happening now." He activated the main display. The forbidden archives appeared for all to see. 5,000 years of sealed history, finally revealed. The assembly watched in growing horror as the records played. They saw what humanity had done to its enemies. They saw weapons that could break planets. They saw the cold efficiency with which humans had erased 3 species from existence. "This is what humanity is," Talis said when the records ended. "This is what they chose to bury. For 300 years, they showed us kindness and peace. They made us believe they were harmless." He paused, letting his words sink in. "They were never harmless. They simply chose not to show us what they really are. And now the Veldari have reminded them." The assembly sat in stunned silence. "Pray," Talis said softly. "Pray that when this is over, they remember how to be peaceful again. Because if they don't, there is nothing in this galaxy that can stop them." The judgment of Earth emerged from behind the dark side of a moon, and, for a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. It was 3 times larger than any ship ever recorded in galactic history. Its hull was covered in weapon systems that made veteran military commanders weep with fear. And it was not alone. Behind it came the true human fleet. Thousands of ships, each one transformed from the outdated vessels the galaxy had laughed at. They moved in perfect formation, a wall of steel and fire stretching across the void. Admiral Dohan Kong stood on the bridge of his flagship, his hands clasped behind his back. Screens surrounded him, showing tactical data, fleet positions, and real-time intelligence. His officers moved with calm efficiency, speaking in quiet voices. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "all fleet elements are in position. We are ready to begin the operation." Dohan nodded once. "Send the signal. Operation First Light begins now." Across human space, the counterattack launched simultaneously. 12 fleets struck 12 Veldari positions at exactly the same moment. The coordination was perfect, impossible by any standard the galaxy knew. The Veldari had no time to reinforce, no time to warn each other, no time to do anything but die. Captain Hannah Yoon led the strike force at the Crimson Nebula, where the main Veldari fleet had gathered. Her ship, the Eternal Wrath, cut through enemy lines like a knife through water. Around her, human pilots flew with a precision that defied belief. "All ships," Hannah commanded, "form attack pattern Omega. Target their command vessels first. "Captain," her tactical officer said, "enemy ships outnumber us 3-1.
I know. Execute the pattern." What followed became known in galactic history as the Battle of the Crimson Nebula.
The Veldari had numbers, experience, and centuries of conquest behind them.
The humans had something else entirely. They fought without fear.
When their ships were damaged, they did not retreat. They pressed forward, using their dying vessels as weapons, ramming enemy ships if necessary to ensure destruction. When surrounded, they did not surrender. They fought until their ships could no longer move, then, they set their reactors to overload and took as many enemies with them as possible. A Veldari commander managed to send one transmission to his homeworld before his ship was destroyed. They do not fight like soldiers. They fight like something that has decided it does not need to survive. They fight like vengeance made flesh. Lieutenant Miho Park had joined a unit called the Ghost Wings. They were pilots who flew the most dangerous missions, the ones with survival rates of 2% or less. When the recruitment call went out, volunteers exceeded available positions 100-1.
Miho flew through the chaos of battle, his weapons firing in steady bursts.
He had died in his heart the day New Busan burned. What remained was a machine with a human face, focused entirely on one thing: making the enemy pay. His wingman was hit, ship spinning out of control toward a Veldari carrier.
"Eject!" Miho screamed into his communication system. "Get out of there!" But his wingman did not eject.
Instead, the spinning ship corrected its course, aiming directly for the carrier's engine section. The collision destroyed both vessels in a ball of fire visible from 1,000 miles away.
Miho did not mourn. There would be time for mourning later. Now there was only the next target.
On the ground, General Tehobek led the liberation of New Busan. His forces landed in perfect coordination, their transports descending through anti-aircraft fire without hesitation.
Every soldier knew they might not survive. Every soldier stepped forward anyway.
The Veldari defenders fought hard, but they were facing something they did not understand.
Human soldiers did not break under fire.
They did not panic when surrounded. They simply kept fighting, kept advancing, kept killing until the objective was achieved or they were dead.
Teho walked through the ruins of the city he had sworn to liberate.
Smoke rose from 100 fires. The sounds of distant combat echoed through empty streets. And, everywhere, the bodies of Veldari soldiers lay where they had fallen.
A young lieutenant approached him.
"General, we have captured several hundred enemy soldiers.
What are your orders regarding prisoners?" Teho looked at the ruins around him.
He thought about the broadcasts the Veldari had sent, showing the execution of human civilians. He thought about the camps where survivors had been tortured and enslaved. "They gave our people no mercy," he said quietly.
"We honor their choice." The lieutenant understood. "Yes, General." Teho continued walking.
Behind him, the sounds of justice being delivered echoed through the broken city.
The Galactic Assembly watched the war unfold with growing terror.
The Veldari Dominion, which had seemed invincible for centuries, was being systematically dismantled.
Human fleets appeared without warning, struck with devastating force, and vanished before counterattacks could be organized. Ambassador Volith called an emergency session.
"We must consider intervention," he announced. "Not to help the Veldari, but to ensure this conflict does not spread."
A delegate stood. "You want to intervene against humanity? After watching what they did to the Veldari fleet at Crimson Nebula? We cannot simply let them destroy an entire species." "Can we stop them?" another delegate asked.
"The Veldari have the largest military in the galaxy. The humans are cutting through them like they were nothing.
What makes you think we would fare any better?"
The debate continued, but everyone knew the truth.
The Assembly could not stop humanity. No one could stop humanity.
They could only watch and hope that when the humans were finished, they would choose to stop themselves.
Deep beneath Earth, Dr. Yunishin worked on Project Awakening's final phase. Banks of computers surrounded her, processing calculations that would have taken ordinary systems centuries to complete. Admiral Dohan Khan visited her facility.
He walked through corridors that hummed with power, past sealed chambers containing weapons that had not been used since the first contact wars.
"Report," he said simply. Yuna pulled up a holographic display. "The final phase is ready, Admiral. The Star Killer Array.
It can collapse the heart of a star, causing it to go supernova.
Any planet in that system would be destroyed instantly." Dohan studied the display in silence.
It has never been tested, Yuna continued. The theoretical models suggest it will work, but there is no way to know for certain without actually using it.
And if we use it on the Veldari home system? Their entire civilization would be destroyed.
Their homeworld, their orbital stations, their shipyards, everything.
Billions dead in an instant. Dohan nodded slowly. "Keep it ready. We will use it only if necessary." "And if it is necessary?"
The Admiral met her eyes. "Then, we will end this war in a way the galaxy will never forget."
High Overseer Krimoth sat alone in his command center.
Around him, screens showed the collapse of everything he had built.
His fleets were being destroyed.
His conquered worlds were rising up against their occupiers. His species, which had been the terror of the galaxy for centuries, was learning what it meant to be prey. He recorded one final message and broadcast it to the Galactic Assembly. "I speak to all species who can hear this," he said, his voice heavy with defeat.
"We attack humanity because we believe them weak. We believe them primitive. We believe they would kneel." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We were wrong. We were catastrophically, fatally wrong. Humanity is not weak. They simply chose not to show their strength. They chose peace because they understood what they were capable of. And we reminded them." Krimoth looked directly into the recording device. "Let my mistake be a lesson to the galaxy. Do not threaten humanity. Do not harm their worlds. Do not touch their children."
His voice cracked.
"Because if you do, they will not stop until everything you love is ash."
He ended the transmission and began preparing for the end. On the bridge of the Judgment of Earth, Admiral Dohan Khan watched the Veldari forces crumble. Victory was inevitable now.
It had been inevitable from the moment humanity chose to fight. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the Veldari homeworld. They are requesting terms for surrender." Dohan closed his eyes for a moment.
When he opened them, they were still cold, still hard, still the eyes of a man who had done terrible things because they needed to be done.
"Accepted," he said. "Contact all fleet commanders. Offensive operations cease immediately." "We have one."
The bridge crew did not cheer.
There was nothing to celebrate.
Only work that was finished, and a galaxy that would never forget what humanity could do when it chose to fight.
The Veldari surrender ceremony took place on a moon orbiting their homeworld.
High Overseer Krimoth knelt before Admiral Dohan Khan, his once proud form bent with defeat. Thousands of Veldari officials watched in silence as their leader spoke the words of unconditional surrender.
"The Veldari Dominion surrenders all claims to sovereignty," Krimoth said, his voice hollow.
"We place ourselves at the mercy of humanity."
Dohan looked down at the creature who had ordered the deaths of millions of his people.
For a long moment, he said nothing. The entire galaxy watched through live broadcasts, waiting to see what humanity would do to its defeated enemy.
"We do not want your species destroyed," Dohan said finally.
His voice was calm, the same quiet tone he had used throughout the entire war.
"We wanted peace. You chose otherwise. Now you will pay the price of that choice." He listed the terms. Massive reparations to rebuild the human colonies. Complete dismantling of the Veldari military. War crimes trials for those who had participated in atrocities. Permanent monitoring of Veldari space. But the Veldari homeworld would remain intact. Their people would survive. Their civilization would continue, diminished but alive. Krimoth looked up in surprise. "You are showing us mercy?"
We are showing you what we always wanted to show you, Dohan replied.
We never wished to be your enemy. We never wished to fight. You forced this war upon us, and we ended it. Now we will give you a chance to become something better than what you were. The surrender was signed. The war was over. Captain Hannah Yoon brought the Eternal Wrath home. As her ship entered Earth orbit, she was greeted by crowds of people celebrating in the streets below. They wanted to call her a hero. They wanted parades and medals and speeches. Hannah refused them all. I am not a hero, she told the reporters who surrounded her when she landed. I did what had to be done. There is no glory in it. I killed thousands of beings who had families, who had lives, who would never go home. They were our enemies, and they died by my hand. But I will not celebrate that. She walked through the crowd without looking back. Her crew followed her, equally silent. They had won the war, but the winning had cost them pieces of themselves that they would never get back. In the weeks that followed, humanity began the long process of returning to peace. Factories that had produced weapons switched back to consumer goods. Ships that had carried fire across the stars were put back into their hidden berths, their weapon systems folded away once more. Soldiers who had fought without fear of death went home to families who did not recognize the look in their eyes. Lieutenant Miho Park visited the memorial that had been built on New Busan. It was a simple wall, carved with the names of everyone who had died in the initial attack. The list was long, filling every inch of stone and, then, spilling onto additional panels that stretched for hundreds of meters. Miho found the names of his squadron, 12 pilots who had died in the first minutes of the war. He placed their unit patches at the base of the wall, along with thousands of other items left by grieving families. Then, he walked away without looking back. He did not know where he was going. He only knew that he could not stay. General Tehobek retired to a small farm on the outskirts of a quiet town. He grew vegetables. He raised animals. He spent his days doing simple work with his hands, trying to forget the things those hands had done. Sometimes reporters would find him. They always wanted to ask about the war, about the liberation of New Busan, about the battles that had made him famous. I hope we never have to do that again, he would tell them. I hope my grandchildren never learn what war really means. That is all I have to say. Then, he would go back to his garden and continue working, alone with his thoughts and his memories. The Galactic Assembly sent Ambassador Volith to Earth with an offer. They wanted to give humanity a seat on the High Council, the most powerful governing body in galactic civilization. It was an honor that had never been offered to a species less than 1,000 years old. Volith delivered the offer personally, his forearms trembling as he spoke. He could not forget the images he had seen during the war. He could not forget the look in Admiral Kang's eyes during their last communication. Dohan received him with quiet courtesy. We are grateful for the offer, Dohan said after Volith finished speaking. But we must decline. Volith was shocked. Decline? But, Admiral, this is the highest honor we can offer. You would have a voice in every decision that affects the galaxy. We do not want power over others, Dohan replied. We never did. All we ever wanted was to be left in peace, to build our worlds and raise our children without fear. You are offering us influence, Ambassador. But, influence comes with responsibility, and responsibility often leads to conflict. We have had enough conflict to last us 1,000 lifetimes. Volith struggled to understand. Then, what do you want? What we have always wanted. Peace. Quiet. The chance to be kind. Dohan's expression softened slightly. We showed the galaxy what we could do when we chose to fight. Now we would like to show the galaxy what we can do when we choose peace. The ambassador left with his offer refused, still not fully understanding the strange species he had dismissed as harmless for so long. Dr. Yuna Shin oversaw the resealing of Project Awakening. The Star Killer array was powered down, its components separated and hidden in secure facilities across a dozen worlds. The weapons that could break planets were put back to sleep. The ships that could darken stars folded back into their dormant forms.
Will anyone ever need to wake them again? One of her assistants asked as they completed the final shutdown sequence.
Yuna thought for a long moment before answering. I hope not. I truly hope not. But, if they do, the weapons will be waiting. They will always be waiting.
She sealed the last facility herself, entering the codes that would keep its contents hidden for another 1,000 years if necessary.
Scholar Thales added a new entry to the Galactic Archives.
He wrote it by hand, in the old way, wanting the words to carry the weight they deserved.
Humanity is not aggressive, he wrote. Humanity is not warlike. They are, in truth, among the gentlest species in the galaxy.
They create art and music of extraordinary beauty. They love their children with fierce devotion. They dream of peace and build toward it with patient determination. He paused, considering his next words carefully. But they have one rule, one absolute law that defines their existence: do not harm what they love.
The universe forgot this rule. We looked at their kindness and saw weakness.
We looked at their patience and saw timidity. We looked at their peace and assumed they could not make war.
We were wrong. Humanity can make war.
They can make war in ways that would break the minds of other species to contemplate.
They simply choose not to. Every moment of their kindness, every act of their gentleness, is a choice. And they could make a different choice at any moment. He finished the entry with a final observation: the universe will not forget this lesson again.
Years passed. The scars of war faded slowly.
New Busan was rebuilt, its towers rising higher than before.
The colonies recovered. Children were born who had never known the sound of Veldari weapons.
On Earth, Admiral Dohan Khan retired from military service.
He moved to a house with a garden, where he could watch his grandchildren play among the flowers. Sometimes visitors would come, important people who wanted his advice on matters of security or defense. He always received them politely, answered their questions thoughtfully, and then returned to his garden.
One afternoon, his youngest granddaughter asked him a question. "Grandfather, why do the aliens always look scared when they see you?" Dohan knelt down to her level and smiled. "Because once, a long time ago, some very bad aliens hurt our people.
And I had to do some very hard things to make them stop."
"Were you scared?"
"Yes. Very scared.
But sometimes being brave means doing hard things even when you are scared, because the people you love need you to protect them." His granddaughter nodded seriously, then ran off to play with her siblings.
Dohan watched them go, these children who had never known war, who had never seen a city burn, who had never held a weapon. They were the reason he had fought. They were the reason humanity had unleashed its hidden fury. And now, because of everything that had been sacrificed, they could grow up in peace. Somewhere among the stars, a young alien child asked her parent why everyone whispered about humans.
Her parent knelt down and spoke softly. "Because they are the gentlest species in the galaxy.
And the most terrifying.
They choose to be kind, little one. They choose peace every single day. But they never forget how to be something else."
The child looked up at the stars, wondering about the strange beings called humans who lived among them. And, on a small blue world, under a clear sky, children played in a garden while an old man watched them with quiet joy. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity had chosen peace again. And, somewhere in the darkness of hidden facilities, ancient weapons slept and waited, dreaming of fire that might never need to burn.